Good evening. I'm going to assume that we've got a broad cross-section here in terms of level of knowledge. And I know there's lots of terminologies and everything has been thrown around in newspapers. So for those of you who are, smart on this subject in oil and gas, bear with me for the first few minutes or so for me to just go through some of these terminologies so it wouldn't appear as if I'm talking over people's head here in the latter part of my discussion. There's this myth. Since I was growing up, there's always been this myth that somehow because we were next to Venezuela and Trinidad and Brazil, and they're they're drunk in oil, we must have oil. But that's not necessarily the case. As a matter of fact, this oil discovery here probably has more to do with West Africa than those countries that are surrounding us. There was something called continental drift at one time. As a matter of fact, that's what led a lot of the exploration to begin with, where the entire Earth was just, all the oceans and stuff that was not dividing. It was one big land mass. And then with billions of years, it separated out. If you look at West Africa, it fits right into South America. And so when they discovered all this oil in West Africa, they thought, shucks, at one time it used to be together. So there is a probability here. The other myth is that a lot of people feel that you can somehow know where oil is, or there are instruments or technology where you can definitely say, this is what's below the ground. Don't be fooled. First of all, oil is generated or created by organic matter, living, like animals, plants, etc. So many of us might be the source of oil for billions of years to come, if they're going to be needing to use oil. But it's created and then it travels very, very slowly. And I'm talking billions of years. It travels very slowly. Before I get to that, the myth again, people believe that you find oil below the ground in these large pools or puddles or cavities. Oil is really stored between, for example, if you've got a bucket of sand and you throw water in it, you're not going to see that water until the sand is saturated. Well, that oil is between those sand grains, between those porous media that we call porosity. If it's 10% porosity, means 10% oil space. That's the capacity that's going to hold the oil. So the oil is not this thing, this pool that is below the ground. So when you drill your well, you try to suck it out and force it out. But getting back to what you look for, you do not look for oil. So if anybody tell you really, technically speaking, what you do, the oil travels, and like everything else, it travels and something traps it. There might be, the formation, which is, like these, if you look at, for those of you who've done any kind of geology, or, the rocks are laid down in sediments, and because of, just tectonic type things or any kind of dynamic movement, it might end up like this, the layers. So as the oil moves, it's trapped here because it doesn't go down there. It always goes up. And so you look for these structures. You do not look for oil. You look for where there are possible traps. And that's the reason why you have so many dry wells before you really hit. Sometimes, I can't remember the ratio, the average ratio, but a lot of times you have to drill a lot of wells before you find oil, because you're looking for traps. Now, in terms of production, there are really three stages that you have to go through to get to production. Exploration, which is what they're doing right now. And then, of course, it's development. After you explore, you find, and you fly, and you believe that there's an economic quantity of oil, you start bringing in like your pipes and casing to drill the wells to start producing. We call that the development stage. And then, of course, you start pumping and producing. When you produce oil, there are three phases. Oil reservoirs are normally an oil reservoir has water at the bottom, because it's heavier, obviously, oil in the middle and gas at the top. Now, you don't always find gas at the top. Oil is generated from the oil. It's like a Pepsi bottle. It has a lot of gas. When you pop that gas, when you pop the cap, oil comes out. And all you do is release the pressure. Same thing in a reservoir. It's under heavy, heavy pressure, especially at these depths that are several miles below the sea. It's under a lot of pressure, so you've got that gas. So when you punch a hole into it, it's like putting a straw through a bottle. You punch it through, it's going to come. It's the same exact thing. You punch a hole through it, and that gas comes up. So that's how you create a lot of gas from the oil. Now, pressure may have released because of movement again before you even punch a hole, and the gas is going to be released anyway. So that's how you get, in a lot of reservoirs, you get a gas cap above the oil. So when you're producing oil, you're producing water, producing oil, and you're producing gas. And why I tell you this, it's really important as to what you do with the gas, but environmentally, what do you do with that water? Here's something that probably a lot of people don't realize. The water is salt. It's more than salt. The concentration, for example, of the seawater, and many of you have gone to the seawater and seen how salt it is. It's about, just to throw a number out there, it's probably about 35,000 parts per million, what it's called chlorides, which is what gives it its salt content. Brine water in reservoirs is anywhere between 300,000 and 500,000 parts per million. And there's a reason behind it. So when you produce that water, it's many times more briny than normal water. So it's always a challenge. What do? You don't just dump it into the sea, because now you're gonna upset the biota and everything else. So what do you do? So that's one of the questions that has to be answered. Now, when you discover the reservoir, you've got to go characterize it. And characterization means you look at the dimensions of the reservoir, the size of the reservoir, which means the thickness, how deep it is, what do you have to do for production. And that's when you determine whether this is economic or not. And I'm sure you've been reading how much oil we have. So that's what determines it, how fast this oil can travel. You hear that it's high porous, which is permeability really, how fast the oil would travel. So when you put in a well, it travels there. How much does it cost, based on the depth, how much does it cost to extract it? The volumes, the pressures in the reservoir, these are all that drives your decision as to whether you should produce or not. So the characterization data is key. It so happened that, that used to be my field of specialty, is characterizing that reservoir after it's drilled to understand exactly what's going on below there, how much stuff you got, how do you get to it, and looking at well logs and everything else. I know that this here is what you're probably most interested in, and everybody, the government and everybody, when we talk about reserves. And I'm sure you've heard all kinds of reserves, probably reserve, possible reserve, just reserve, probable, proven, recoverable. And the only thing that differentiates all of those reserves is the probability that you can produce economically and in a stable political environment. So it depends on the economics, which is the first thing, and then the operation, equipment. Do you have the technology to produce, and of course the politics and what's going on.